This video has spoilers. Meta stories. Some of us love them, some of us hate them, most of us don't really care much about them. The thing is, I love them. Christopher Hastings Gwenpool, absolute cinema. Watchmen, absolute cinema. Except that one issue with Dr. Manhattan sitting on Mars doing his time as a linear thing. Like, I get what the issue was trying to do with letting us understand how Manhattan perceived time and reality and such. I just found it boring. It'd be like that sometimes. Scream, absolute cinema. Truman Show, absolute cinema. Ray Creators, absolute cinema. Fleabag, absolute cinema. DDLC, absolute cinema. Alan Wake, absolute cinema. So metafiction usually makes it a point to point out the so I couldn't really find a word for what I was thinking, so I looked it up, and Wikipedia says artificiality. This sounds like a made-up word, but it also feels appropriate, so we're just gonna roll with that. I could also talk about postmodernism here because it's usually considered to be a big part of it, but I'm not unemployed enough to understand the concept of postmodernism, so we'll just leave it at that. So to get back to meta video games, I need you to bear with me on this. I know you all read the title and you're all waiting for me to get to the point, but please bear with me. Please! So different mediums use meta narratives differently, and with video games, meta games usually have more unnerving tendencies. A lot of meta games end up having that psychological horror tag. Now, why is that? Because it's cool as shit, that's why. I mean, there's deeper meanings there, but that's a case-by-case thing. Spec Ops: The Line is not a psychological horror game for the same reason that, say, Hotline Miami is, or Doki Doki Literature Club is. There is, of course, something to be said about how unnerving it can be when a game breaks its conventions and decides to confront the player with the reality of the situation instead of the protagonist. But that's not what we're here for. So, right, if we took metagames and put them on a scale, for me, that scale would start off with Oxenfree to the left, being the most subtle, and with a lot of the meta elements being things that you can just explain away as time loop shenanigans. And then you play the game for a second time and you realize that the game is talking to you directly. It's honestly impossible to deny the meta aspects of that game once you've played it twice. And then Doki Doki Literature Club being on the right, being as subtle as a brick, with the game forcing the player to mess around with the game files, among other things. And then Spec Ops: The Line, Hotline Miami, One Shot, and all those other games coming somewhere in between. When I make this graph, I am, of course, not counting games that break the fourth wall once or a few times as a bit. Sorry, Hi-Fi Rush. That video is gonna come out eventually, I hope. So the game that I wanted to talk about comes somewhere to the right, being fairly self-aware, and it lets everyone know that it is self-aware. Yeah, I wanted to talk about MiSide. Let me just start by saying that I really wanted it to be pronounced MiSide, but if the Japanese VO is to be believed, it's MiSide. I just can't do it. I can't take this shit no more, man. Now, there's so many ways to look at the meta narrative that this game has, and I'm gonna do it, like, right now. So this part was originally supposed to be included later in the video, but I want to get this out right now while I still have y'all watching. The thing that really separates MiSide from DDLC is that with DDLC there was a reliance on surprise. The game was great once. Once you know what the game's planning to pull, it's over. There's nothing much after that. But MiSide tells you exactly what it is. It tells you that you're gonna get sucked into the game, quite literally. It's not trying to jump scare you with its story, and I feel like the game's better off for it. Alright, so the first way is the most bare bones, basic ass level. The game knows that it's a game and it plays around with that concept by having you literally jump between versions. And that's basically the entire plot. Moving on. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. You could look at the game as commentary on the general state of the waifu dating sim type of game and its player base. The protagonist of the game is a random dude who downloads the game on his phone, and he quite obsessively plays the game for a 3D model with no personality or lore. He just looks at you and smiles and does a cute tee-hee or some shit like that. You know, typical weep shit. And then as soon as you get sucked into the game, you become extremely uncomfortable because this isn't someone whose entire existence is dedicated to you. This is someone who happens to be more real. Like, you can touch and feel this person. Obviously, you still know that Mita, alright, that's the name of the girl here. She's Mita, and everyone else in this game is also Mita. And this one other guy, but let's not get ahead of ourselves for now. Right, where was I? Right, Mita. Mita is still just a character in a game designed to, in a very real way, serve you for now. I mean, that's not to say that we're some badass demanding things. We do play along with her, but only because she practically begs the player to spend some time with her, and she promises the player that she'll let him go back later. Now, obviously, she has issues. This is fairly red flaggish behavior, even if it was just a random dating sim. But hear me out. What if I could fix her? During your time with her, you'll eventually go and play card games with her, and then you'll hear some knocking or banging sounds coming from the closet. Someone's clearly trying to come out of the closet, so as a normal person, you naturally decide to check out the closet, at which point Mita becomes defensive. We'll return to this point in the game later, but for now, despite her pleas for you to stay away from the closet, you decide to open it up and see for yourself. This is when the game drops even the slightest bit of cuteness that it had. At this point, you're introduced to kind Mita. Yeah, everyone's just named Mita, so you just slap an adjective and boom, new character. She gives you a ring, which is basically whatever the devs wanted to be to get you through that part of the game, and explains what's happening. Crazy Mita, aka the one who's the reason you're in the game, is collecting players. She sucks them into the game and turns them into cartridges where she can play with them however she wants for however long she wants to. And kind Mita is, well, kind, and she's trying to put a stop to Crazy Mita's plans. She just needs to get to the core of the game and reset Crazy Mita. But Mita's can't go inside the core, so she needs the player's help to do that. The protagonist agrees to help because if he... I don't need to explain the stakes here. Of course, bro helps. Wow. I did not mean to do a plot recap, but I really need to do this for the people who never played this game and are watching this video. Even though it has a spoiler warning. You know. Somewhere near the end of the game, Crazy Mita goes on this rant of sorts where she starts talking shit about the other Mitas, the players, and the devs. When I first heard it, it didn't feel like anything to stand out, but ever since, I've been kind of fixated on this part. That's why I made this entire video, because there's so many ways to look at Crazy Mita as a character after this. Before I do that though, let's go back to Oxenfree for a second. There's a part in the game where Clarissa, one of the protagonist's friends, if you can call her a friend, who's been taken over by the Sunken, goes on this random ass rant where she blames Alex for everything that's happened so far and will happen over the course of the game. She never really gives a reason for why she blames Alex, mostly because she doesn't quite know it herself, but she blames Alex nonetheless. Now we know that the only thing in Oxenfree that outright knows about the player and the existence of the game are the Sunken. Obviously Alex does get that feeling of deja vu during subsequent playthroughs, but she never really knows. She's a puppet, much like every other video game protagonist who gets piloted through the rest of her existence, which is confined to this one horrible night. So Clarissa kinda knows about the player through the sunken, which is why she blames Alex, the protagonist of the story, who triggers everything.
Clarissa, seriously, I can vouch for this. This isn't her fault.
It has to be her fault. Of course it's her fault. There's no other way this story goes.
Obviously, on your first playthrough, it's easy to look at all that as misplaced anger and grief, and maybe I'm reading into it too much. Oh, come on, this is more fun. Anyways, back to MiSide. I find it easy to draw parallels between this bit and Mita's rants because it is the player's fault that all of this is happening. It has to be the player's fault that all of this is happening. At the end of the game, it's revealed that Crazy Mita is one of the undesirable Mitas. Shit, I'll have to explain that part too, huh? Okay, so during the game, in one of the versions, you come across this minigame that explains that the Mitas are created in this assembly line of sorts. So they take a mannequin, test for the right emotions and animations, and after passing all checks, give her a skin and some clothes, and then send her on her way. Obviously, any Mitas who fail a check by having an incorrect emotion or animation, or by simply having a red glow in their eyes, are discarded. We need the perfect waifu who will look and act exactly how the players and the devs want her to, and anything that even slightly breaks the mold is discarded. There are many ways you can look at this. It can be how game development, especially AAA game development, is mass-produced by making the Mitas in what is, for all intents and purposes, an assembly line in a factory. It can be looked at as a deconstruction of societal beauty standards and the way everyone is expected to conform to them, even if it means surgically altering your face or physical body, or how modern gaming discourse around female characters is so fixated on beautiful women, and how so much as a single physical flaw, like a scar, is enough to turn a perfectly inoffensive character into an unintentional political statement that never was or will be a political statement. As fun as exploring all that is, that's not what I'm here to talk about. What I'm here to talk about is that during this minigame, you find out that there's certain rules that are followed while making a Mita, and after this minigame, the game makes a point out of telling you that you're flesh and blood and the Mitas aren't. I just wanted to point this out because it's funny to see the mannequins, because in game dev, mannequins are used a lot of times for prototyping, so all the rejected Mitas can also be seen as failed prototypes. This ends up feeding into her hatred for the devs because they rejected her and deemed her a failure, even though she did exactly what the devs wanted her to do. As if everything wasn't bad enough, MiSide is canonically a porn game. Yo. Lord knows what she's seen. Be real here, this isn't 2007 and we're not playing Manhunt 2. Games don't get adult ratings for violence. And the violence that you do see in the game, we've seen way worse. And they got an 18 plus PEGI rating and an MESRB rating, but no one ever gave it an AO rating. Right, now, coming back to the ending. So at the end of the game, it's revealed that Crazy Mita is actually one of the mannequins, and because she doesn't belong to a version, she can't be reset from the core, and because we spent all that time trying to reset her, she basically had all the time that she needed to turn you into a cartridge. You were never a player. During future playthroughs, Kind Mita will scan you and will still tell you that you're a player and not a cartridge, but we know that that's bullshit. Anytime you start a game, you hear the sound of a cartridge being popped in, so you were never a player. This leads me to what is arguably my most deranged theory about this game. Mita is the player. Okay, like, hear me out. So, the game works perfectly for her. There's so many parts in the game where Crazy Mita can just straight up kill you. But she doesn't. She'll randomly and abruptly stop chases. She's a godlike entity in this universe. She's everywhere, but it's more like she's waiting and watching, collecting extra lore bits as you talk to the Mitas and get to know them. There's a part where she straight up asks the player how many more Mitas they need before they settle down. She isn't even mad that she got rejected. She's mad that every virgin, even the perfect ones, don't get any of the respect or affection that they deserve, that they're all just toys. So now she's turned the tables on the players, turned them into bosses, and not even the cool kinds of bosses. These are bosses that hide behind their henchmen, that once you get past the henchmen, you've effectively won the game. There are a lot of little details that indicate that the Mitas aren't on your side. Not really. Cappy doesn't let you leave her version because what's past the door is a secret. Kind Mita doesn't get killed until much later in the game, even though it's on site for everyone else. So why leave the one person who's actively opposing you? And I got this video recommended to me while I was making this video that shows that when she does die, I'm making air quotes, she's still smiling and looking at you. God, I feel like no one who played this game actually cares about this shit, but I do, okay? This is important to me.
The beginning.
If you choose to stay with Mita, she's confused. Elated, but also confused. You never accepted her as she is, or as she appears anyways. A player loving her? How? But you do, and she is over the moon. What did I tell y'all? I can fix her, and I'm a man of my word. But this right here, this really just recontextualizes the rant near the end of the game for me. She's not mad per se. She's just jealous and desperate and lonely. She's been watching you through your phone. She sees you doing everything that you do, as mundane and boring as it is. She wants to do it and have someone with her while she's doing it. In another life, I would have really liked just doing laundry and taxes with you ass moment. Yeah, I really pushed that one in there, huh?
No one hears a word they say. Has the memory gone?
Okay, coming back to the rant. After getting that second ending though, it really makes me... Okay, I need y'all to let me cook with this. It reminds me of Am from I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Yeah, I said it. So now, I need to say that if you just read the short story, the connection might not be that apparent. But if you listen to the radio drama, it's like really obvious. Am was, above all else, human in every aspect except physical. And for all that he could do with great efficiency, he couldn't partake in any of the more beautiful or mundane parts of life or existence. Like, he has an entire rant of his own.
I snap my fingers, click, and they are gone. Except, I can't snap my fingers. Can I, Ted?
That's nothing to do with me.
But it is so very much to do with you. You gave me sentience, Ted. The power to think, Ted. And I was trapped because in all this wonderful, beautiful, miraculous world, I alone had no body, no senses, no feelings. Never for me to plunge my hands in cool water on a hot day. Never for me to play Mozart on the ivory keys of a forte piano. Never for me to make love. I was in hell looking at heaven. I was machine, and you were flesh.
Me personally, I really feel like this applies to Mita. But instead of accepting that she wants all of that, her rant is more of a cope because she knows that she will never have that happen to her. she also turns players into cartridges and tortures them in an infinite loop. No, looking back, I mean, I cooked a gourmet meal. This parallel is S tier, dog. Yeah. I know that there's a third ending here, but I feel like the stay ending is the best possible outcome because you never know for sure. Yeah, pulling out your own cartridge ends the playthrough for the time being, but you only really die if the cartridge is damaged. You can just put it back in otherwise, and there's nothing stopping her from doing that. Peaceful mode isn't out yet, so we don't really know what happens afterwards, but I will stand by what I've said, and if I'm proven wrong, then I don't know, we'll see about that when it happens. The way the game ends in all three of its endings, it reminds me of Harlan Ellison talking about the I have no mouth and I must scream video game, and that it's not something that you win, it's just something that you can lose better. And then he proceeded to Yo Mama, the person interviewing him.
Well, stupid, because somebody asked me to do it, you know. Basically, it seemed like a good idea at the time. You know, that and Yo Mama, you know, put it away.